What do you think disability has to do with identity?
Yeah, I think it's a big question. That's a very loaded question too. I think disability has a lot to do with identity. It's not everything about identity. It's a piece of identity, right? And I think as we start to, I was thrilled that this series, this conference really included disability, because often when we're talking about diversity, we don't include disability as one of the categories. We have kind of central work streams. Disability gets left out. And so I was grateful that as part of my identity as someone with a disability, I could be included today in this conversation. So I think there's that piece, Asya, right? There's the piece of how do you own it for yourself in terms of a part of you? How do you also, what are the intersectionalities of the other pieces of yourself that you can lay the lens, you have a lens that way as well. But I do think disability needs to be part and talked about. And so I'm grateful to be on this panel with the other professionals who have really taken time to study this. But I do think, the more that we talk about it, the more that we can start to have it as a part of identity. I mean, it's amazing that I think it's 7% of business leaders actually identify as being someone with a disability, when we know that there's a larger percentage of people who have it. Mm-hmm. And even only 20% of those are actually comfortable identifying and admitting to it. So I think disability has a huge piece of identity.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. Actually, there's something I want to add to that, Ruth. It's a really good point there, because in my research, I'll find in my same data set, I'll have 90% of the people will investigate gender differences, right? In the research that I do, 90% of the companies will do gender research. 75% will do differences based on race and ethnicity, but only about 4% are doing analysis based on disability status. So that difference is huge.
Yeah. No, it's crazy because, they even say 90% of companies prioritize diversity as something we know right now, right, with DEI being a huge piece, but only 4% are actually prioritizing disability as part of that. So Peter, I have that same stat. Yeah.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah, it's, we're often called the forgotten diversity segment, because disability has been culturally, globally, been something to hide, as Ruth said, and be ashamed of. And it's been something, nonprofits take care of and government agencies take care of, but it hasn't really been a focus of corporations globally. And we're seeing that shift happen now. And we're seeing the movement from kind of don't ask, don't tell about disability to being loud and proud. And that is such an important message for our movement. The louder we are, the greater our movement is going to be towards equity, inclusion, and access.
I couldn't agree more. Why would you say, though, why do you think that that's the case, that disability is not something that is constantly, that is looked at as a form of diversity?
I think we haven't been very nice to people with disabilities. We've institutionalized them. We pay them sub-minimum wage. Some of those practices are still happening today. And so, we spend a lot of time telling the world what people with disabilities can't do, and not enough time, like your video shows us, Mike, of what people can do. And that's what disability inclusion is about. It's not highlighting what you can't do, it's highlighting what you can accomplish no matter who you are, what you look like, and what your abilities are.
Exactly.
I think inclusion, if I could just, inclusion in the education system is so important to this, and meaningful inclusion in the education system, because as you go down that road, I'll tell you a story. Janae, we do lots of interviews and lots of stories. That one was from a CTV national news story about 6 years ago. Jaden's 25 now, but his sister's 3 years younger. And we did an interview where the interviewer asked, it was me and Jaden and Janae, my daughter. She was 13 at the time. And he said, do you ever wish your brother, he said, I'm going to ask you a tough question. Do you ever wish your brother was quote unquote normal like every other kid? And Janae, without skipping a beat, as a 13-year-old said, well, honestly, since Jaden was diagnosed with autism before I was born, I don't know what a normal brother is like. So Jaden kind of is my normal. And the thought I have there listening to that, and I use this in my presentations, it's kind of the close of my presentations, is to say Janae didn't have a choice. She was born into the family, but because the school was very deliberate in including Jaden in a regular classroom all the way through, and you saw sort of the end of that experience for him in his school experience, normal for all of the kids at that school, included Jaden. And across the world, my passion is international development in addition to disability. And around the world, kids like Jaden are just simply not included in classrooms. They're completely invisible in their societies because of stigma. And we're talking tens of millions of kids around the world that are not in school.
And I think, can I add on? Sorry, Mike and Meg, I think you're bringing up an amazing point that literally just happened to me the other week, which is we have these stereotypes and stigmas of what we think disabled people or people with disabilities are and what they're not. But it just happened to me the other day. I've been talking a lot lately about disability and my own. And somebody said to me, a close friend said, I know you're talking about this a lot, but I actually don't see you as having a disability. And I know she meant it in a good way. But I have it. Because maybe I'm still hiding in some ways because I haven't been sharing the challenges of things I have to think about, or people with disabilities have to always think about or overcome. We're constantly thinking outside the box of how to solve for something or how to do something. And so I think a big piece of what both Meg and Mike were talking about is the stereotypes and stigmas that we've allowed for a long time people with disabilities to.
Yes.
Absolutely. And you bring up such a good point, because I have an invisible disability. I have epilepsy, and I disclose readily. For me, it was never an issue. But during the course of my career, I'd have people say to me, Meg, stop disclosing. You're putting pressure on the rest of us to disclose. I always thought that was so interesting. Why wouldn't you share? For me, it was a safety issue, right? If I was going to have a seizure at work, I would want somebody to know what was happening and what to do and how to be prepared. But I get that a lot too. Like, oh, you're not really disabled. You just have a condition, So as it goes in our community, sometimes I'm not disabled enough,
But
I wanted to add, it can be really easy in some places to not see, right? Like if I'm sitting around, you might not see my limp or you might not see my spasticity. Conversely, it can be really easy to see in some cases. And I feel like traditionally we would hide those people away, right? Because it takes more effort to engage with them, supposedly. But I have always found, like, the more you're engaging with people of a higher effort, like the more they have to say. And it always astounds me when people are amazed at what these higher effort people have to say. And it's like, well, what do you expect? Like, they're people too.
The people.
I also wanted to add that in all of what we're talking about, a huge part of this is access, because if somebody with a disability can't get to the table for whatever reason, right? Is there no wheelchair ramp? Is there no sight cues and stuff like that? Then we can't go anywhere, right? Like, we can't go to school, we can't go to work, we can't go to the play. And so I think that's hugely limiting for people, is just getting to the table and being there. So, and I think that also goes hand in hand with this whole over planning that Ruth was talking about, right? Why are some people so over planning? Probably because they're over route planning, right? So
that is a great point. And there's two things that you said that I want to unpack. And the first thing was what Meg had mentioned about some disabilities are invisible. So if a person were to look at you, they wouldn't know. And even you, Sydney, you had said, we're looking at you from the top, right? So we have no idea. And the truth is, the disabilities exist. Now, those people who have invisible ones I feel like they have it harder, because when they finally get to speak about it, then people are like, oh, come on, it's nothing. Right. That's nothing, be quiet. And so my concern is, how do we then create spaces for such people? Because the truth is, there isn't even enough space for anybody, right? But then there are some people who have it and might not even want to talk about it, like Meg was saying, because they just would be ostracized or looked upon differently. And nobody really wants that, because that belonging is a need that is a thing for every one of us. So how do we then create spaces for such disabilities?
Well, I've been finding.
Honorable.
Oh,
Okay.
Go
No,
ahead,
Pete,
Peter.
go.
Go ahead, Peter.
Go ahead, and then
Yeah.
you can go after you.
so this is a research angle that Meg and I have really been trying to dig into, because I've been noticing these trends that the more people are able to disclose their disability status and can be more open about it, their scores have been increasing on all of my metrics. Now, I don't have a lot of great data about it because I've been limited in terms of some of the questions that I'm able to answer, but most of the data is pointing to that if we create a space where people can disclose, then it seems just to the point, you get it out, just like you were saying, you get it out in the open. It's like, oh, it's not as big of a deal as we thought it would be. But it's getting people to that point. And what I've been seeing is the organizations who, in general, have the most amount of disclosure are where we have leadership who've been able to disclose that they have a disability status, and they make it open. And just like Meg say, well, yeah, I bring it up all the time, to the point that people are like, well, you don't have to bring it up all the time. It's like, who cares? Just bring it up.
Yeah.
Yes. Honorable, you were going to say something?
Yeah, all I was gonna say to this is I think there's a broader societal issue in a sense too about the way that we communicate with each other. I mean, now I live in a political world, so I deal with it probably at a different level in terms of the intensity on social media and I would call it complete dysfunction in communication on social media. But I think that this is something that is societal right now. That we've lost our ability to communicate meaningfully with each other, and a big part of that communication is listening. And so, we have to be very deliberate when we're bringing people around whatever table it is, whether it's a workplace or any other place we are, to make sure that we're waiting and listening. It's one of the things that actually with Jaden, for me, it's been a real sort of learning experience, because the whole nothing about us without us concept, as it relates to disability, allows a lot of people, as we move down that road, there's a lot of people who are able to speak more freely because of that movement. But Jaden's nonverbal. And when he's trying to communicate something, it's really difficult for him. And one of the things that I'm learning as a parent of a child with autism is just to wait, not to speak for him, not to jump in all the time, not to try to guess what it is that he wants because I've spent 25 years with him, but rather to just wait on him. And it might take some time and some patience. He can use an iPhone to communicate, but he typically communicates just in a single word noun or whatever it might be. But reading cues and all of those different things, these are life lessons that are absolutely transferable for everybody in our communication with everybody, because as a society, we're not paying enough attention. We're not pausing to identify where someone's at and give them space even to be comfortable to weigh in and say what they need to say.